Okay, so hats off already. Let me switch over to our F1. There you go.
I need to get an F1 hat so we know which show we're on.
Yeah, what's up with that? Hey, let's get CJ an F1 hat. So if anybody out there wants to donate, just donate some money to the channel. I promise I'll use the money to pay for CJ's F1 hat. Or if you want to, I don't know. We haven't set up the mailbox yet, so I don't have a PO box. So we don't get that many viewers yet. So once we do, we'll set up a PO box for gifts.
Yes.
But we haven't done that yet. All right, let's talk F1. Let's do that. All right.
Into the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, the home of Formula One, the very first points race in the Formula One series back in 1950. It has been a stalwart on the calendar ever since, and it's been held, the British Grand Prix has been held at Silverstone consecutively every single year since 1987. So this is along with Spa, Monza, Monaco. This is one of the classic tracks and one of the classic races.
And then last week at one of, I guess, if anybody was going to go to a race, if you said, hey, there's one race you can go to, or there, actually, I think Monaco's got to be up there. Yeah. Not for the, I mean, it's not about the race, I'm sure, but it's about the scenery. I guess Monaco would be one, but I would guess that the Red Bull location would probably be second, wouldn't it? Top three?
Yeah, that Austria is an amazing, absolutely amazing country, and that track is in the mountains in Tyrolia. It's is what they call it. It's a fantastic place. Highly recommend going there. When I was watching the coverage over the weekend, I was thinking, geez, it's been a long time since I've been there. I need to go back, and I would definitely go to that race. The other one that I would put up on that list for great scenery out in the country with hills and that type of thing, like we saw at Austria, would be yet to come this season, but Spa in Belgium would be another great one to go see.
Okay, so in this race at this location, the defending champ, Lewis Hamilton, has won this thing 8 times. And it was a little bit of a, not a long shot, but he's always in that second group, which is kind of a long shot in F1, because the guys that are 30 or 40 to 1, they're not really called long shots. They're called miracles. So miracles don't happen more than once every 5 or 6 years in the sport. So the long shots or whatever, the 8 to 1, 15 to 1 types. And I'm sure that's where Lewis was last year, but still he started second, won the race. And a matter of fact, just even looking back at like the last 8 races or so, there's only been 3 pole sitters that have won. So you have had second place winners, and also a starting fourth was Max back in 2020. And then we've got last year, though. Talk about what differences, if any, you see from last year's race to this year's race, especially since Lewis Hamilton seems to be the king here in the British Grand Prix.
Yeah, Lewis Hamilton, without a doubt, is the king of Silverstone. He's stood on the podium in every race at this track since 2014. He's either been first, second, or third. The biggest difference for him, certainly this year, is that he's behind the wheel of a Ferrari and not a Mercedes anymore. So he's going to have a bigger job ahead of him this year. However, I do think it's going to be or a podium finish maybe within grasp for him. So if everything goes right, if he's performing at his usual higher level in front of his hometown fans and home country fans, I think we could see Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari on the podium, and that would be a great thing. However, it is likely going to be McLaren again. McLaren have just been the dominant car and the dominant drivers all season. It's going to be cooler at Silverstone this year, certainly compared to Austria. So I think that might favor somebody like a George Russell as well. So I would think that from an odds perspective, probably Norris, Piastri, and Russell, with a potential for Lewis Hamilton on the podium. And again, if you notice, those guys that I'm choosing, they are all British drivers, because British drivers at their home Grand Prix do have a tendency to up their game and wind up on the podium. I do think Norris probably stands the best chance this week after winning at Austria, assuming he doesn't shoot himself in the foot this time. I think he probably stands a good shot at winning on Sunday.
So since Russell, though, hasn't won this, this is probably a good week to take him, right? Is there any reason where this is not a good track for Russell, even though he's going to be motivated?
No, and I think the reason Russell stands out this week, again, is the temperature. We saw how the cooler temperatures in Canada, where he was able to win and make them the best use of his Mercedes car, really came into play under the cooler temperatures. And they do have upgrades that they brought. McLaren brought upgrades last week, so they're going to be more difficult to beat. But we saw how strong Russell and Antonelli both were in the Mercedes in the cooler temperatures in Canada. So faster turns here at Silverstone versus a place like Canada, so more high-speed turns, a little bit more load in the tire, might be a little bit more work for them. But I do think we're going to see more out of Mercedes than we saw last week at Austria. So George Russell, I think, is a pretty good shot for a podium finish, if not a potential win, if you want to go for somebody as a long shot win.
Yeah, I mean, look, there aren't that many weeks in F1 where you can go for a 14-1 shot and feel, okay, this is not a bad long shot play, and this is one of those weeks. So why not?
Agreed.
And what about Max? So Max did not have a good week last week.
No, like anything and everything that could go wrong for Max did. First of all, he struggled with the setup in practice. They couldn't find the speed. When the temperatures changed, they were able to move forward, but then by the time it got to qualifying, the temperatures went back to being hot. So he ended up having a poor qualifying, ended up getting caught out by a yellow flag as well, so wasn't able to get his fastest lap. I think he ended up starting 7th, and that track position ultimately is what cost him, because Kimi Antonelli locked it up coming into turn 2 on the first lap, and who did he collide with as he lost control? None other than Max Verstappen. And Verstappen and Antonelli were both out of the race in the second corner. So I think Verstappen's going to be in there with a shout this weekend. He tends to be in there with a shout every single weekend. You asked the question last week as to whether or not the championship was effectively over. I think at this point, we can rule out Max Verstappen. I think it's going to end up being between Piastri and Norris. With Norris's win last week, that margin is less than 20 points, but I think you're looking at a 2-horse race from here on out to the end of the season.
Wow. Already. Okay. And is there still any way to separate the two? I mean, it still looks like...
Well, just for this week, though, not for the championship, but just for this week, I would separate Lando Norris from Piastri because it's his home race.
Okay, so this is definitely a week. So this is actually a good week, one of the rare weeks to wager. See, I think the other week that's a really good week to wager is Monaco. You wait until after qualifying, you see who's first, and then no matter what the money is, it's not going to be that high. It could be minus 150. Just do it. Just take it and just, you're fine. And then here, this is, you have a little bit better option to make money because, again, you can go with both British drivers. You can go Norris 155, Russell 1400, take them both, and you should feel pretty good.
Yeah, Lando Norris last year led 19 laps despite starting third. Verstappen was on pole. This was one of the tracks where, Verstappen started fourth. This was one of the tracks where Norris is just able to get out front. He went into turn 1 versus Verstappen and got the lead there. Just the impetus to perform better in front of your home crowd. The British drivers, Norris, Russell, and Hamilton, all three have done it. And I think it's resident if you look at their statistics at this track in particular, plus by the fact that this is the biggest and most important racing circuit in Britain. So if you're growing up in Britain and you're going to be a race car driver, you are going to spend a lot of time on Silverstone. So they know this track really well. And I think that just tends to push them a little bit higher up. When you look at the track and the temperature and the way that things go, McLaren certainly is going to be the favored car. But given the conditions, as I talked about, compared to Canada with the cooler temperatures, I do think Mercedes probably stands a pretty good shot again.
Okay. And I don't know if this would be one of those. If I was gonna, if I'm used to maybe going with McLaren, not all the time, but sometimes I think it's a good week to take them. I'm not so sure I would do McLaren this week. I think
I
because of the fact that I still think that there's some potential long shot possibilities.
totally agree. At -3, I would rather choose one of the two drivers,
Yeah.
and probably Norris, and be comfortable with that, even though he's 155.
Okay. So are they racing again next week, or do we have a break?
No, they're going to be off for 2 weeks before they end up going to, why is it slipping my mind?
Belgium.
Belgium, yes, the other track that you should go and visit in addition to Austria.
And then is this the longest break, or do we have a long break at some point?
We'll have a summer break. I think after Hungary, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see.
Okay.
That'll be 3 weeks long versus the 2 weeks that we've got here.
Okay.
When is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, in between Hungary and the Netherlands or the Dutch Grand Prix, there's a 3-week break.
Yeah, so we've got August 3rd to August 31st. That'll be the longest break, the last long break of the season.
Yeah, and then we'll
good timing too.
December 7th.
Incredible. Okay, so and we'll be here every step of the way.
Yes.